Picture this. It's the early 1940s. World War II is in full swing. A tumultuous period in human history, where nations across the globe are locked in a deadly conflict that would shape the world for generations to come. The world was divided, with the Axis and Allied powers vying for control. On one side you had Germany, Italy, and Japan, known as the Axis. On the other, the Allies, led by the United States, United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. Now, let's focus on Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, had rapidly expanded its territory across Europe. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, was not only defending its homeland, but also supporting its allies on the Eastern Front. In the midst of this, Stalingrad, a city in the Soviet Union, became a point of strategic importance. Why? Well, Stalingrad was a major industrial city and a key communication hub between the Volga River and the Caspian Sea. It was also a psychological symbol bearing the name of Soviet leader Stalin. Germany saw the capture of Stalingrad as a way to strike a significant blow to the Soviet Union's morale and resources. For the Soviets, defending Stalingrad was not just about protecting their land, it was about preserving their dignity and proving their resilience to the world. So, as the German forces moved eastwards with Operation Barbarossa, their grand plan to conquer the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a key target. The city's location made it a gateway to the rich oil fields of the Caucasus, a resource Germany desperately needed for its war machine. This was not just a battle for land or resources, it was a battle for survival, for ideology, and for the future of the world as they knew it. It was a clash of titans, where the fate of the world hung in the balance. With this backdrop, the stage was set for one of the most significant battles of the 20th century, the Battle of Stalingrad. On August 23, 1942, the German offensive on Stalingrad began. The initial assault was a display of the German army's power and precision. Like a lethal dance choreographed to the rhythm of war, they advanced, their tanks and infantry moving in unison. The city of Stalingrad was under a rain of artillery and air attacks, and the once bustling city was quickly transforming into a battlefield. The Soviets, on the other hand, were caught off guard. They had expected an attack, but the intensity and speed of the German offensive took them by surprise. The Red Army soldiers, although outnumbered and under-equipped, put up a fierce resistance. They fought in the streets, in the buildings, and even amidst the rubble. It was a desperate attempt to halt the German advance and buy some time for reinforcements, but the German offensive was relentless. As the battle raged on, the city of Stalingrad became a grim testament to the brutality of war. Buildings crumbled, streets were littered with the remnants of war, and the air was thick with smoke and the scent of gunpowder. The human cost was immense. Thousands of soldiers and civilians alike fell victim to the war machine. The German army suffered heavy casualties, but so did the Soviets. It was a war of attrition, and both sides were paying a heavy price. But despite the onslaught, the Soviets were far from beaten. They retreated, yes, but not in defeat. They were regrouping, licking their wounds, and preparing for the counterattack. The Battle of Stalingrad was only just beginning. Despite their best efforts, the Soviets found themselves pushed back, but they were far from defeated. And as the smoke cleared, it was evident that the battle for Stalingrad was shaping up to be one of the most significant and brutal confrontations of the Second World War. As the battle progressed, Stalingrad turned into a city under siege. Both the Soviet and German armies employed unique tactics during this siege. The German forces, led by Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, attempted to cut off and isolate the city from the rest of the Soviet Union, employing a strategy of encirclement. They targeted key infrastructure and supply lines, aiming to starve the city into submission. On the other hand, the Soviet forces, under the command of General Vasily Chuikov, adopted a policy of hugging the enemy. This involved engaging the German forces in close-quarters combat within the city, preventing the Germans from using their superior air power and artillery to full effect. This strategy was not without its costs, however, as it led to high casualties among the Soviet forces. Life during the siege was nothing short of brutal for both soldiers and civilians alike. Food and water were scarce, and the constant bombardment left the city in ruins. Many buildings were reduced to rubble, and the streets were filled with the wreckage of tanks and other military vehicles. The harsh winter weather only added to the misery, with temperatures dropping to well below freezing. The civilians who remained in the city were caught in the crossfire, with many losing their homes and loved ones. Despite the hardships, they played a crucial role in the city's defense, helping to build fortifications and providing support to the Soviet forces. The siege lasted for more than 2 months, with the Soviet forces holding out against the German onslaught, but the situation was about to change. The Soviet High Command launched a counteroffensive codenamed Operation Uranus. This involved a pincer movement that aimed to encircle and trap the German forces inside the city. The situation was dire, but the tide of the battle was about to turn. In mid-November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus. This counteroffensive marked a significant shift in the tides of the Battle of Stalingrad. Its primary objective? To break the German forces' stranglehold on the city and turn the tide of the war. The Soviet Red Army, under the command of General Georgy Zhukov, had been preparing extensively for this counteroffensive. The plan was to exploit the German forces' stretched lines and encircle them, cutting off their supply routes. The Soviets launched their attack with a two-pronged assault, aimed at the flanks of the German Sixth Army, which were held by the under-equipped and poorly trained Romanian and Italian divisions. The Red Army's overwhelming force quickly broke through these flanks, and within 3 days, they had managed to encircle the German Sixth Army completely. The German forces, led by General Friedrich Paulus, found themselves in a precarious position, trapped within the Soviet encirclement with no clear route for escape. The situation was grim. Their only hope was to break the encirclement from the outside. The German High Command launched Operation Winter Storm in December in a desperate attempt to break the encirclement and free the trapped Sixth Army. However, despite initial successes, the operation ultimately failed. The Red Army held their ground, and the German relief effort was repelled. The German Sixth Army's situation became more desperate as the weeks passed. Cut off from supplies and reinforcements, they were left to face the harsh Russian winter with dwindling resources and morale. The failure of the German forces to break the encirclement marked a significant turning point in the Battle of Stalingrad. The once mighty German Sixth Army, which had marched into Stalingrad with confidence, was now trapped and slowly being crushed by the Red Army's relentless pressure. The German Sixth Army was trapped, marking a turning point in the Battle of Stalingrad. The Soviets had turned the tables, setting the stage for the final chapters of this brutal conflict. With no hope of rescue, the German Sixth Army surrendered on February 2, 1943. The last days of the Battle of Stalingrad were fraught with desperation and despair, as the German forces, surrounded and outmatched, faced the inevitability of their defeat. The once formidable German Sixth Army, now reduced to a shadow of its former self, finally succumbed to the relentless assault of the Soviet forces. The surrender wasn't just a military capitulation, it was an admission of the failure of Hitler's grand vision of a swift victory over the Soviet Union. The once invincible German war machine had met its match on the snowy plains of Stalingrad, and the world watched in stunned silence as the German forces laid down their arms. The cost of the battle was astronomical. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers on both sides had fallen, their lives sacrificed on the altar of a war that had grown more brutal and more deadly with each passing day. The city of Stalingrad, once a bustling metropolis, lay in ruins, a stark testament to the savagery of the conflict. But amid the devastation, there was a glimmer of hope. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad was a beacon of light in the dark days of the war. It marked a decisive shift in the balance of power on the Eastern Front. The Soviets had not only defended their homeland, but had also dealt a crushing blow to the German forces, halting their advance into the Soviet Union. The strategic importance of the Soviet victory cannot be overstated. It was a morale booster for the Allied forces, signaling that the tide of the war was beginning to turn. The Battle of Stalingrad was a testament to the resilience and tenacity of the Soviet people, a symbol of their indomitable spirit in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The Battle of Stalingrad came to an end, marking a significant turning point in World War II. It was a battle that changed the course of history, a battle that, in its brutality and devastation, underscored the human cost of war. It was a battle that, even in its darkest moments, shone a light on the indomitable spirit of humanity.